We're doing 4-job Fiesta rules again, so 1 job per crystal. Unlike the worst jobs video, I actually don't think these are the 4 best jobs in the game, or even that these 4 jobs work the best with each other, but I do think this team is interesting in its own way. I do have my own opinion for what the actual 4 best jobs are, but I'll get to that later. My pick for best wind crystal job is Blue Mage. I think this will probably be the most debated crystal, because all 3 of the mages here are extremely powerful for very different reasons. Plus the wind crystal just has great jobs overall. It's probably the most stacked crystal. But I think taking all of Final Fantasy V into account, Blue Mage is the best. Now this probably won't be a surprise, but Beastmaster is not going to be the fire crystal job, and that is where the Blue Mage gets most of its great spells from. I'm partially doing this intentionally to see how well the amazing jobs do without the synergy of lesser jobs. So no control for Blue Mage, no dual cast for the other mages, no rapid fire for the physical classes, etc. But it's not like the Blue Mage doesn't get any good spells without Beastmaster. Level 5 Death is gotten really early. The Arrow line is a decent replacement for the Fire, Ice, and Lightning lines. Deathclaw is gotten after the 3rd crystal and can just decimate several bosses for the rest of World 1 and some in World 2 and 3. It gets level manipulation with Darkspark to make using the other level magic super easy. Vampire is a full heal in the GBA version, which is the version I'm using just for consistency with the other video, among other things. It can also equip swords, which are probably the 2nd best weapon type, and that allows access to great spells like Sleep or Old really early and for free. So while Black Mage would be great for having Sleep to neutralize some bosses, the Sleep Swords got me covered on that end. And while Old is a Time Mage spell, the Ancient Sword is gotten fairly early into World 1 and can trivialize a lot of bosses. But like I said, the White and Black Mages definitely have their arguments for the best Wind Crystal job. I expect this is going to be similar to the Worst Jobs video where I had a bunch of people telling me that 4 Bards is actually worse than 4 Berserkers. The only jobs with comparable healing to White Mage is Blue Mage with White Wind, but that's much less consistent because that's based on the Blue Mage's HP, and the Chemist with Mix. But the White Mage does it much faster and much easier, and without having to go to a wiki. Similarly, casting stuff like Protect, or Shell, or Image is a lot simpler and faster than doing Chemist Mix stuff, or having the ninja's image skill. The Black Mage's sheer nuking capability is also insanely valuable. After a certain point, he basically never stops doing 4-digit damage. He also has some gimmicky stuff like Toad and Sleep, which are extremely good in their own right, but as I said earlier, I can at least cheese with Sleep with the Sleep Sword. I'll say this now, this run is a hell of a lot more fun than the Worst Jobs run, so if you do disagree with my choice here, I would heavily recommend you try other variations for yourself. It's pretty fun to just steamroll the game with these overpowered jobs. Time Mage is the best class in the game. Every character gets several turns to the enemy's 1, and you get pretty decent attacking spells like Comet and Meteor. You get quick late game to double your efficiency, Float works wonders against some bosses, and it also nullifies damage floors. Plus, it has decent healing with the healing staff, and regen for more minor healing. The Summoner and Mystic Knight are also amazing, so the Water Crystal is probably the 2nd most stacked crystal in terms of its job list. But seriously, the time magic, just haste and slow. You can at least get some haste effects with the Hermes Sandals in World 3, or the Masamune if you have a Samurai, but slow I don't think can be inflicted by anything but a Time Mage. And basically, nothing is immune to it. The only boss I'm aware of that's immune to slow is Liquid Flame in World 1, and I still don't really know why it is immune to it. I know realistically Mime is the best Water Crystal job, but it's not really supposed to be a standard job, like it's equivalent to Freelancer in this case. Fire Crystal is probably the most underwhelming crystal, because it's mostly support or weird gimmick classes. The classes aren't bad, but Beastmaster's defining feature is just control, Ranger's is rapid fire, The Bard doesn't get super great until the end of the game where it can get the best magic, and Geomancer was my pick for worst job in the Crystal, so that leaves Ninja. The Ninja is actually one of the few jobs with basically all of its abilities being amazing. It has the second fastest agility, double wielding is one of the best abilities in the game, even though this job set won't actually be able to use it. We get more first strikes. Throw is an awesome and extremely versatile ability that actually gets even better with mages because the scrolls are based on your magic stat. It gets Image for free temporary immunity to physical hits, and Smoke for free fleas. I've questioned in the past why they gave 2 jobs an Escape from Encounters move, but now I'm thankful that it is like this because it lets me very easily farm the chicken knife with both the best and the worst party. Like I said, basically the only downside is that of the jobs that I picked, only the ninja can really make use of dual wield. The blue mage could theoretically use it, but it has a negative strength stat, so he's going to be in the back row casting magic. Plus, shields are amazing in 5, so he definitely wants to be holding on to that as much as possible. I know I said that some jobs are only good for one ability, but the chemist takes that to the extreme. I think Mix actually has an argument for the single best ability in the game. The effects are extremely varied and can be useful for all kinds of different situations. It can have recovery and buffing power comparable to the white mage. It requires absolutely no stats to use, so any class can use it. Farming items for it is not very difficult if you know where to look or how to beat the enemies that drop the important stuff. It could do stuff you wouldn't even imagine, like being able to make you heavy type, which gives you immunity to some debuffs and instant kill effects or percent of ace damage attacks. Not even getting into the level manipulation, Mix could only be dragon power, and it would probably still be worth picking the chemist over any other earth job. It's just that powerful. And while Mix is obviously incredible, the chemist is still full of other pretty good abilities too. Drink is pretty gimmicky, but the double HP drink might be good. Plus the power drink is bugged to only boost the damage of Goblin Punch, which is not a reason why I picked chemist, but it's a cool coincidence that we have Blue Mage in our team. Recover and Revive are just free full party Asuna and Raise. I've never really understood why the chemist gets those. They seem more like a white mage ability, but I'm not complaining. Pharmacology makes high potions and ethers very much worth using mid-battle, instead of just in the menu in between regular encounters or bosses. A free 1000 HP from a chemist high potion is extremely useful, because by the end of this run, every character barely has more than 1000 health. And the chemist can use the healing staff. The healing staff will fall off at some point, which then I'll start using high potions more. But it's nice to have 2 classes that can use staves. Like I mentioned at the start, I don't even think these are necessarily the 4 best jobs in the game, just probably one of the best job sets for a default 4-job Fiesta run. Personally, I think that Ninja might be able to be replaced with Mystic Knight or Summoner, but when it comes to Mix and the Time Mage, you're basically splitting hairs when it comes to arguing who benefits the most from it. Anybody that can do damage will get their damage output multiplied several times by Dragon Power and Haste. If you didn't know, the Blue Mage actually has a pretty significant strength penalty of -8. For a mage this makes enough sense, but it also can equip broadswords and shields, which, you know, isn't very mage-like. I think -8 is a little much, but by the end you're not having a physical attack anyway, so it doesn't really matter. If you're unfamiliar with Goblin Punch, basically it's a basic attack that ignores row entirely. It does almost identical damage to a front row basic attack, but it has the benefits of magic in that it can't miss, it doesn't wake up sleeping enemies, and I don't think it triggers physical attack counters. And if you're the same level as the target, it does ×8 damage, which is a thing you always forget about until it happens. The blue command also isn't affected by silence, so you'll always have access to easy, free basic attack damage. Blue Mage kind of feels like an experiment in making a level mage, with the level magic, obviously, Dark Spark halving the enemy's level, this ×8 damage thing. It's pretty interesting. And while I haven't played Final Fantasy Tactics for more than like a couple hours, from my understanding the Calculator class is basically this concept taken to the extreme. Definitely a cool idea, even if I kinda find it hard to imagine how this actually works in universe. Hey, I finally started with a class that has a spell. I don't have to spend my days throwing potions at undead Siran, thank God. She also gets off slow as her opening spell, so we get an early preview of what the Time Mage is going to be doing in every single boss fight. I actually forgot to get Vampire before fighting Karl Boss, so I won't have that for a bit, but it's not game-changing or anything. I don't have very much health for basically the entire run. This is a question I've had for a while though. Is Drain magic actually impacted by magic evasion? Like any other debuff or stuff like that? It seems like more than half the time I tried to use Vampire would just outright miss. And sometimes whenever an enemy tried to use Drain on me, not just in this run, but in all of my runs, it would also miss. But if it would miss on me, that would be even weirder because the only magic evasion that I have that I'm aware of is the Aegis shield. Unless a Drain is just a debuff that can be blocked. Magypsie and Forza get shredded by arrow pretty well, despite us not having any wind boosting equipment. I'm kinda surprised though, I figured Magypsie would have much higher magic defense since she's the mage of the two. But speaking of that, I actually think that's probably the worst thing about the arrow line, is that while the spells are technically equivalent to the black mage's spell lines, the blue mage both doesn't have access to the air knife until late World 2, and also has a much lower magic stat than the black mage. Once we do get the knife, it's way better, but it's also lessened slightly by the fact that our spell repertoire is insanely good by that point. But aside from arrow tearing things up, Flash makes Forza a non-issue, and theoretically Black Mage with Sleep could have made this even easier, but I don't think it's enough of a game changer to worth worrying about. We got Vampire, but more importantly we have Pawn's Chorus, a toad spell that you get way before the actual toad spell. That is one legitimate benefit for blue magic. While a good chunk of the blue magic spell list is basically just copied from other magic trees, you usually get the blue mage equivalent either much earlier or it costs significantly less. As one example, Missile and Gravity both do percent-based damage to an enemy, but Missile does 3/4 HP and costs 7, and Gravity does half HP but costs 9. Garviga does 7/8 HP and costs 18, so there's actually an argument to be had which one is better there. But this line of thinking applies to several other of the spells, like Flamethrower being Fyra but at half cost, Vampire being a full heal, or at least half of a full heal when it's not bugged, but it only costs 2 MP and you can get it in literally the very first dungeon. And I hesitate to even call it a dungeon. You can get level 3 Flare midway through World 2 if you have the right job set up. So if you're a metagaming god, you can take advantage of this class more than most classes in the game. I would say Blue Mage and Chemist overall are definitely the meta-game classes. Anyway, this Pawn's Chorus thing is notable because Garula can be toaded, and even more notable is that Garula has a unique response to being toaded, that being to attempt to untoad himself. While I was informed of this fact in one of my other FF5 videos on this channel, I assumed he would just continue to attempt to untoad himself if it failed, but apparently that's not the case. First of all, it's silly that Toad can even fail in this way, even if it did benefit me ultimately. But second, he spends about half the fight futilely hitting me for 0 damage as a frog, so he's definitely a non-issue as far as bosses go. Despite having Time Mage now, this fight is still a little bit rough. Luckily the soldiers are vulnerable to flash, so that mostly makes them a non-issue. But Shiva's always there throwing out Blazzaras, which is why I have Galoof in the front row, so we're not getting constantly bombarded by full party Blazzaras. My damage is still subpar with only Goblin Punch and Arrow to my name too, so actually whittling away the enemy party is a very slow endeavor, but the more enemies get taken out the easier it gets, as is every fight in basically any non-Atlas RPG ever made. Actually, on that note, and while this fight goes on for a while, I'm gonna go off topic for a second. Basically, my only Atlas RPG experience is Persona 5, which seems to be, from what I understand from the internet, the SMT style of gameplay kind of dumbed down or simplified. Maybe dumbed down is too harsh, I don't know. From what I read about the SMT games, they do subvert some RPG tropes in that way, where if a boss is 2 enemies, or if it's a boss and a bunch of little guys, or there's just a bunch of little guys, or whatever, then if you just leave one enemy alone for too long, it becomes super strong to basically punish you for not taking out everything at the same time. I played a good amount of the 2 Trauma Center games on DS, and that's an Atlas IP, and even those games have that trope with some of the guilt strains. So in that sense, I'm inclined to believe what I've heard. I've also heard that SMT5's re-release is really good, which is both good, but also kind of disappointing to me because I have the original SMT5 on Switch. I got it for like $30 a year or 2 ago and I haven't played it yet. And now that the re-release is out, and everyone says it's significantly better than the original, I'm kind of less inclined to play it now. But really, with Persona 3 Portable and FES, Persona 4 Golden, and Persona 5 Royal, I really shouldn't be surprised that Atlas is still doing this updated re-release stuff into 2024. But really, all of this is an excuse for me to say, where's the new Trauma Center game? The controls on DS were great. You could have made another one on 3DS, we didn't get a damn thing. Same thing with The World Ends With You. I know that's not an Atlas game, but still, when am I ever gonna get to talk about The World Ends With You in a Final Fantasy V boss rush? We could have made an updated World Ends With You on 3DS when we got that weird-ass mobile phone version. I like the Switch port well enough, and I even like that it has an entire new day, but then we got Neo World Ends With You. And that game is good, but it's not the same as the DS version, you know? I've gotten way off topic here. I will admit up front that I played this fight kinda poorly. The lack of heavy flags across World 1 makes gravity an extremely useful tool throughout, and my strategy was to get the tornado form as fast as possible, set up all my relevant hastes, and heal up, then go to town with gravity. Unfortunately, this boss is one of the only enemies in the game that's immune to slow, and I still don't get that. But this was going pretty well until gravity just stopped working at the end of the fight for some reason, and the team's accuracy just went to shit overall. The last minute or so is very sloppy, but it eventually worked, so I guess it's fine. There's gonna be some bosses here with some downtime, so how about this for a topic? I want to know people's opinions on if these things are glitches. The Pokemon Gen 1 1 in 256 miss glitch, the Pokemon Gen 1 Body Slam not paralyzing normal types, and the Final Fantasy I intelligence stat doing nothing. The Gen 1 miss, I think people would be inclined to say is a bug, because that definitely wasn't intended to happen. They just typed in one less number than they were supposed to. But Body Slam in Gen 1 not paralyzing normal types is deliberately programmed to save on memory or RAM or something? I don't know, I'm not good with computers. And Final Fantasy I's intelligence stat is similarly programmed to not do anything at all. It's actually not a bug that there is a stat that does nothing. They probably were intending it to do something because, you know, it's an RPG, but then maybe they just didn't have time before release to actually program it incorrectly. I don't know, I wasn't in the development room. But I bring all this up because what people would determine as a glitch can kind of vary from person to person. It could just be programming fuck-ups like the 1 in 256 miss thing, but Body Slam not paralyzing normal types and the int stat not doing anything are not how you would expect the game to function. While they are deliberate, you would still expect an intelligence stat to affect your magic damage. And I'm assuming they fixed that in future ports of Final Fantasy I. I'm sure there's other examples of this kind of thing in other games, but these three examples kind of weigh on my mind in terms of what actually is considered a glitch or not. I would like to know people's opinions about this. Era is a much-needed damage upgrade from this place that wipes out the wolves easily, and Deathclaw is maybe the most valuable spell for this playthrough. It's definitely up there with how many bosses are vulnerable to it. This is kind of like the equivalent of getting that Gaia Hammer against Titan in the last run, but this is way easier to get, way more ubiquitously useful, and way easier to use in general. Efreet, surprisingly, does not have a heavy flag, so no Deathclaw right now, but even without that, this fight isn't that hard. With the ninja at our disposal, we can finally do some pretty sizable chunks of free damage, even more once the Time Mage comes into play. It's definitely too bad that Aqua Breath is non-elemental. Water as an element is woefully underrepresented in this game, amplified by the fact that the Magus Rod doesn't boost water damage in any version of this game, even Pixel Remaster. That was seriously one of the things I was really hoping the Pixel Remaster version would fix, considering Pixel Remaster actually had balance patches, but I guess at this point the lack of water damage boosting has to be a feature, not a bug. I don't get it. The only way to boost water damage is with a Chemist mix, and that successfully increases all elemental damage done. The Chemist just gets everything. Deathclaw and Aqua Breath do, however, make short work of a lot of these other bosses. Whenever I see Crayclaw now, I remember his pain-in-the-ass boss fight in Stranger Paradise. Talk about an upgrade. The Soul Cannon just gets eaten alive by lightning scrolls, and with haste, there's just no way this thing will ever get to fire before getting nuked. This game gives you a lot of free shurikens, so that's a pretty easy and good way to fast forward to the final phase where he gets insta-killed by level 5 death. Definitely not a big deal. By far the most annoying part of this fight is that Galoof took the healing staff and one of my elven mantles with him to his own world. After so many playthroughs of this game, you'd think I'd have learned to not let that happen, but maybe next run. I've had a couple people bring up Crystal Project on Steam to me in the comments of these videos. I've looked it up, and it definitely looks like my kind of game, since, you know, I've made all these videos on this game, but I'm curious how many people would say it's worth playing. The only thing I have to go off of with the game are all the Steam screenshots and videos, and the couple of people that have recommended it to me. But some things that are sticking points in negative reviews are some bosses are very annoying and gimmicky, and the platforming is annoying and gimmicky and also probably unnecessary in an RPG. If it goes on sale, I would definitely like to try it out, but I'm curious what everyone thinks about it if they've tried it. It's not very expensive, so it's not like I'd be breaking the bank anyway. It's always been weird to me that mix is not the innate chemist thing. When I think chemist, I don't really think about drinking random potions you get from dropped enemies, but maybe that's the only way they could get people to use drink, because it definitely gets overshadowed by mix later on. Luckily, it only takes 45 ABP to get it. I would be devastated if you had to master the class to get it, like how you have to master Red Mage and the Ranger to get their awesome abilities. But with Mix, we're definitely in business now. With a float mixture, most of this guy's damage is dealt with, and with all my physical evasion and image, this guy basically just can't touch me at all. We are going to be getting a lot of use out of throw in this run, so I'm glad the scrolls are as strong as they are, even if you have a bad magic stat. I know I said in the intro that Ninja is potentially replaceable by Summoner or Mystic Knight or something, but Throw is seriously amazing as far as abilities go, and I'm really glad it's the Ninja's innate one. The fact that Scrolls are only 200 gil and Shurikens are only 2500 is very surprising to me. The last Meteor boss has no heavy flag though, so see ya. Gilgoldmesh 2 is vulnerable to Old, so the Ancient Sword comes out to cripple his damage output and speed for the rest of the fight. I try to silence him with the Mage Masher going into the second phase, like always, but it didn't take this time, unfortunately. But he's so crippled by Old, and reapplying slow after he hastes himself is no problem, so really the second part is just more annoying than anything. I don't know how many people have this similar tendencies to me, but in this game, I always buy the Mage Masher, and I always keep the main Goshes, but I almost never end up using them, even though a shield knife would be extremely valuable on mages a lot of the time. There's just too many good staves and rods in this game. Usually in games in general, I'll always buy or keep items or weapons or armors with extra effects, just because you never know when that kind of thing will be useful. I remember that happened to me a lot in Final Fantasy XII. There's so many wacky armors and weapons in that game I never knew when they'd be useful. Although I didn't end up doing like any of the hunts or post-game stuff, so it just cluttered my inventory for no reason. I think the only time that mentality has actually helped me is in Tales of Xillia, where elemental damage is so prominent, but elemental armors are also extremely prominent to the fact where you can stack so much of it you start healing from the element instead, and it completely neuters a ton of bosses. I wish more games had that effect. Here's some random games I've played in the last year and my recommendations. Most of these games have been out for a while, so most people have already bought them, but whatever. Outcore is great. It's free on Steam, and you can probably beat it in 2 to 3 hours. It's part platformer, part messing with your desktop game. It's pretty fun and unique. Slay the Princess, great game. Probably not for you if you don't like visual novels, but I'm not a super big fan myself and I still loved it. Nelson Tether's Puzzle Agent 1 and 2. The puzzle difficulty is kind of all over the place, but the story, art, and voice acting is great in the first game. The art and voice acting is still great in the second game, but the story kind of is really poorly written for some reason. I would just recommend playing the first one and stopping. Deus Ex Human Revolution and Mankind Divided, both great, although I liked Human Revolution more. It's mostly just too bad that Square Enix completely fucked up the series and it's probably going to be dead again for who knows how long. Mankind Divided came out in 2016, and we haven't gotten another real Deus Ex since that one. Omori. This is the game that's most likely for 90% of people to have already played it, but it's got great characters, story, art, music, and the gameplay just isn't fun at all. Definitely worth watching a no commentary playthrough on YouTube for, though. Outer Wilds. This is the kind of game that if you like it, you've probably already bought it, played it, and loved it. I bought it, played it, and loved it myself, but it's definitely not for everyone. If you haven't played it, you can play it for a couple hours, and you'll be able to tell pretty quickly whether it's for you or not. If it isn't, you can just refund it. Arrow GPX just came out on Steam, I think in early access, but it still scratches the F-Zero itch if you need something like F-Zero GX. I'm not very good at F-Zero in general, but I'm still having a hell of a time with it. Cats Organized Neatly and Dogs Organized Neatly are two grid-based puzzle games where you just try to fit cats and dogs into grids. It's very simple, and mostly is notable just because the art is very cute. I'm not very good at it though, so I guess I would recommend it if you like puzzle games and dogs, or cats, or both. I actually forgot to record Archaeoavis getting insta-killed by a Phoenix down. That's so sad. How's this for Blue Mage math? He's level 31, and level rounding rounds down. Alternatively, I could have used the instant death mix, because this Gilgamesh is specifically not immune to instant death, even though he has a heavy flag. Kinda weird. Before I go farming for reflect rings, I want to ask you this. What is this gap for? It's not enterable, it's just a random gap in the geometry. Maybe someone mentions it, because this has always bothered me. We have a sleep sword. Swords are such a great weapon type. While he's annoying, Kotobel Pass is kind of interesting in that, as far as I'm aware, there's not really any way to cheese him. You kind of just need to slug it out. My strategy is either hope he misses with Evil Eye, very unlikely, or just spam gold needles, and that's what I go with. Or you could have a ribbon or something to just be immune to Petrify outright, but I'm not touching Dancer with a 10-foot pole after that last run. I still hate this guy though. Even though he's not really that hard, he's still annoying. I do, however, now have the level 5 time magic from Moore, plus Eroga and the Air Knife, which is great. I really should have bothered to use them here, huh? The crystals have annoyingly high magic evasion, so it takes a lot of MP and Death Claws to get them all down, but it works eventually. Carbuncle is not heavy during his healing phase, and Gilgoldmesh 3 takes care of himself. Exdeath gets shredded here, there's no way around that. Level 2 Old decimates his damage output right away, so with haste we get so many turns before he can do anything noteworthy. Before I started metagaming this game, I honestly expected that every major boss would have a prime number as their level, so you couldn't do any stuff with the level magic against them without gambling with Darkspark. But no, the game is surprisingly generous across the board with status effects, which is nice. I use all the Dragon Fangs I've gotten up to this point for dragon powers here, and it probably wasn't necessary, but it just feels right to totally destroy Exdeath here. After so many runs where he takes up like 10 to 15 to 20 minutes out of the whole total video time. I've actually looked at the watch time analytics for the past few Final Fantasy V videos, and it's funny that there's usually a really big gap where the Exdeath fight is, and then it jumps back up to the fight immediately after him. Not that I blame people, sometimes these fights can drag, but this Exdeath fight was fun. Sleep Sword. Wendigo is as boring as ever, so in place of actually watching this, how about I ask you a philosophical question? If you were to go to the mix page on the Final Fantasy Wiki, which I would recommend you do just to see how many goddamn mixes there are, you might notice near the bottom that of all the attack mixes, not that many of them actually do damage like a regular spell. Most of them are fixed damage, where their damage value is based on your maximum HP or how much HP you're missing or what your current HP is or whatever, stuff like that. Most of those are also elemental, so I want to ask you this. What is the point of a deterministic damage move that is also elemental? If it's just based on your HP, is there any point to it, or is it just for flavor? Or is it just for the sake of making enemies immune to certain mixes by making them an element? One of the mixes like that does fire, ice, and lightning damage simultaneously. Does it do damage if you're immune to one of those elements but not all of them? Also, that mix costs 2 Dragon Fangs, which is horrible. I'd rather just use 1 Dragon Fang to boost my level by 20. I seriously gotta know if I'm just overthinking this and it's just for flavor. One of the Gladiator's special abilities is like that too, where it does an elemental attack that just does 9999 damage. If it's hitting the maximum damage threshold, why does the element matter? It's cool thematically because the element is based on the character and what crystal they represent, but from a gameplay sense it just seems arbitrary. The only thing I can think of is if you're weak to the element, so if it would do 1000 damage because you have 1000 health or whatever, then if an enemy is weak to fire, then that move would do 2000 damage. But if that's the case, what's up with the Gladiator version of that? It does maximum damage, it can only do less damage if they resist fire, earth, wind, or water? That seems weirdly punishing. Again, if somebody knows what the point is, please tell me. Omniscient goes exactly how you expect, but Minotaur gets torn up by the Kiss of Blessing with the chicken knife. Unfortunately, Ferris spends about half her turns trying to flee with it, but the damage output more than makes up for it. The best part about these guys is that I get Meteor for free. If you kill Odin with Break, you should not be able to get his summon, just because I think that would be funny. Even slightly underleveled, around the 31 to 33 level mark, the magic boosted scrolls do tons of damage. If Dragon Power is added to the mix, I'm sure I could have easily hit the damage cap against this guy, and Quick would have made it go even faster. As is, this is a pretty cheap boss as far as scrolls go. And for the record, we do stay around the low 30s till the end of the game. It's about World 3 where I just decide to start running from every battle, so my level usually caps out around where I fight Exdeath at the end of World 2, unless I need to do some grinding against the Iron Giants at the end of the Void. Ferris basically fights Bahamut by herself. I don't get any unlucky chicken knife flea attempts, just pure berserk and dragon power damage. I guess technically she's not doing it solo because she doesn't do the mixes herself, but you know what I mean. As another philosophical type question, does this fight count as being subversive in terms of its setup? It's a late game boss that you fight in one of the first dungeons in the game. I feel like we have kind of a subversion poisoning in media nowadays, so it's hard for me to tell what's actually subversive or not. Here's a strategy I love from watching TASs of this game. She's level 68, and coincidentally the time between Bartz's 2 turns is just enough for her to get down to level 65 and die instantly. Yes, you could theoretically do this to any boss that is either vulnerable to old or has an even number level. Bartz has equipped rods to make his fire scroll damage a bit better, but aside from that, everyone's just chucking scrolls and Lena's on support duty with some meteors thrown in. This is basically just the fire scroll version of Leviathan. These guys are dispatched in very familiar ways. I actually forgot to get self-destruct early in World 1 because I neglected to think about what I'd do for this guy. I'm glad I remembered though, it's still funny. First off, sorry for the weird music in this fight. I'm using an SNES music mod for this version, and it kind of messes up sometimes. I don't think it has anything to do with the mod, I think it has something to do with me using speed up recklessly. It's a great mod, by the way. The GBA version doesn't have bad music, but the SNES and Pixel Remaster just kind of blow it out of the water. Anyways, I brought Recover specifically to this fight to counter his full party frog move. And this frog move is basically the only time I'd ever consider using Recover. Full party Asuna and Raise are not bad skills by any means, but unfortunately it's kind of something that's made for a freelancer or mime when you have more than one ability slot to work with. They definitely have their place, just not in 4-job Fiestas usually. All I want to say about Twintania is that this is a first try victory, and it really shouldn't have been. Unsurprisingly, the last two bosses end up being the hardest. While the barriers do have heavy flags, they're also vulnerable to instant death, which is also why I assume there's the mistake on the wiki about whether they're heavy or not. The first half of the fight is basically me setting up for the second half to not get instantly killed by Necrophobe's super damaging physical hits. So I use a lot of mixes to get Protect and Shell up. And then once I think I'm properly prepared, I start throwing out death potions. Things kind of meander for a bit until Gilgoldmesh shows up, but I wasn't super worried as long as my healing was decent, and nobody lost their Protect status. Hey, if you've ever been interested in picking up a Tales of series, for whatever reason, Tales of Grace's F is getting remastered, as shown in the latest Nintendo Direct. In my opinion, that's the best game in the series, so I definitely think it'll be worth picking up when it comes out in January. Although definitely look up reviews and stuff of the game beforehand. You don't want to buy a buggy port. I'll say this though, according to the website, the Steam version is going to have 120 frames per second option, which maybe for regular PC gamers that should be a no-brainer, but seriously, Bamco hates the Tales of series. If you saw the Tales of Symphonia remaster that came out not that long ago, that was a porting disaster. Horribly AI upscaled textures. It was barely even functional on the Switch at launch, and even now I'm not sure if it's totally up to par. In my opinion, the best way to play Symphonia is still on the GameCube, or on Dolphin. But anyway, Tales of Graces is great. Definitely the best game in the series. When Tales of Vesperia Definitive Edition came out, a lot of people were saying that was the best game in the series, and I definitely think it has an argument, but I think when people tried it out, they got burned by the extremely slow first third of the game. Kind of like a Final Fantasy XIII thing, where fans of the game say, well, when you play it for 30 hours, then it gets good. And I can't even really deny that that is the case. You can say, why isn't the game fun immediately? And you're definitely right in this case. Your main party starts off extremely crippled to how you start off in other Tales of games. I saw someone describe Vesperia as you start off handicapped and slowly have to unhandicap yourself throughout the game. And that's unfortunately a pretty good description. Tales of Graces, though, is not like that. And it's only going to be $40. I know Tales of Arise came out a few years ago, and I think that was the best-selling game in the series. I definitely have my issues with it, but if it's gotten you into the series, then that's great. I hope you pick up Tales of Graces sometime and play it and love it as much as I do. Plus, Tales games go on sale constantly. I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that by the middle of 2025, you'll probably see it on 75% off on every platform that it comes out on. So you won't have to wait very long to get it on a good price. One thing I do think is weird is that Tales of Graces is a Wii game, but this new port still has DLC. If you buy the digital deluxe version, you get some battle music as DLC, basically. Very, very strange. But that's Bamco for you. They're always milking all their series for all they're worth. I'm sure at least some of you are familiar with Tekken 8 and its microtransaction hell, but I guess that's just video games now. Exdeath really just doesn't stand a chance here. I'm really glad there's this phase before Neo Exdeath because it always gives me a chance to set up before the real fight starts. The most dangerous part of this fight is always when you leave him alive when he has low health for too long, because at a certain HP threshold he just starts throwing out meteors non-stop. But yeah, we just throw up all of our protect shells, dragon powers, all that stuff to get ready for the second phase. There's not a lot to say that hasn't already been said. With all of our buffs set up, we're basically set to just nuke Exdeath into oblivion. As usual, we use most of our beginning time to take out the Almagest section, and then Ferris uses Quick to use 2 uses of the magic lamp to set up for Odin at the very end of the fight. Usually my strategy is to wait to use Odin to kill the back part last, because if you don't know, each part of Exdeath has its own devastatingly powerful attack, that being a super powerful vacuum wave, white hole, Almagest, and Grand Cross. And while you can take out the parts individually to take out those moves, if you leave one part alive, it's attacking twice per turn and can use all 4 of his special moves, so it harkens back to that Atlas RPG kind of boss design. So usually I'll leave that last section just so I can instantly kill it with its Antetsuken, because it's not heavy for some reason. I didn't do that in the worst jobs video, basically because I was willing to gamble on having one less part of the boss to hit me. It wasn't really a good idea, and it almost got me killed, I think, in that video, but it did work. Well, this run was a hell of a lot more fun than the last one. I'm glad someone gave me the idea to do this, because it was a nice palate cleanser after having to deal with the Dancer and the Thief. Like I said at the beginning, if you disagree with me about what jobs would be considered the best for each crystal, I would heavily encourage you to try your own runs. Really, Final Fantasy V content is an almost bottomless pit. 4-job Fiesta by itself means that there's almost an infinite amount of ways to play this game, and they can all be fun in their own ways. This game might not be the most difficult RPG out there, but it's definitely one of the most fun that I've played. I don't even like turn-based RPGs, but look how many times I've played this game. I've still got a couple of other ideas for runs of this game. I mean, if you've got suggestions in the comments, I'd like to hear them. But yeah, I'm glad the Final Fantasy V videos get so much love. See ya.